Adam says, can you please explain how the buying process from manufacturer to store to customer? First thing that happens is stores just don't buy from manufacturers. That doesn't happen. Our industry is all about authorized dealerships. So there isn't like a, hey, I really like that. I like your Strat. You don't call Fender and go, I like Strats. Can I buy 6 of them? You literally go through an authorization process to become a dealer. You fill out paperwork, and it's all a process of what they need, not what you need. So it's like, do they need a dealer in your area? What's the benefit to them to doing this? What's your store like? What's your square footage? And you could argue, obviously that's Fender. You could go to a small manufacturer, but most small manufacturers are going to say the same policy where they want you get approved to be a dealer, to be an authorized center for this brand. Now, some manufacturers, and it's all by what they need, right? So if a manufacturer needs dealers, they may actually hire someone to actively go out and find dealers. Those are third-party sales representatives, right? And those sales representatives might actually carry, we call it a line card. They might have 5 or 10 brands on their line card. So in other words, when they walk to your store, when they contact you, they're not a dealer for, like, here's a good example. Godin doesn't have an actual sales rep. So at least in my area, they didn't. Different areas have different things. So my sales rep was Godin, Seymour Duncan, Big Joe pedals. I thought Kala ukuleles. I could be wrong. Like, he just had a bunch of brands. So he would come to your store and go, hey, you want any of these brands? And you're like, yeah. And then, he would set you up each one with paperwork for each brand. So that's how that would work. Once you're authorized, then in the authorization process, there's like a couple things. First, does your store have the square footage they want? Some of them have time in business. They don't, you open last Tuesday, they don't want you, but maybe you've been in business for a few years. The other thing they're going to do is go, okay, location's good. Then you got to qualify for some kind of credit terms. If they do that, most of them do some kind of credit terms. In other words, you're going to buy the stuff. Credit usually is 30 days or 60 days. So in other words, you buy $1,000 worth of stuff or $10,000 worth of stuff. They ship it, and then you get a bill to pay it within 30 days or 60 days. That's usually how that works. Some companies have the first order you have to pay up front, and then after that, they do that. Some companies will put it on credit without even checking your credit. Because again, it's all about what their needs are. If they're desperate, they're going to need dealers. The other thing they're going to do is they're going to usually all have some kind of rules that they're going to impose on the dealer. Like, you can't sell on eBay, Reverb. By the way, that's a big one with manufacturers. A lot of manufacturers try to kind of restrain retailers from selling on Reverb and eBay. So they'll say, you can't sell on Reverb, eBay, or Amazon. And you can't price the stuff lower than this price on the, so you can't put ads out or put it on the internet or put it anywhere with the price lower than the MAP, minimum advertised pricing. Then they might have an ethics clause, like, hey, if you do anything wrong, we can cut you free as a dealer anytime we want. So that's how they'll kind of mandate that too. And then last, they might have, depending on the size of the manufacturer, a buy-in, a minimum required buy-in that's usually annually. So example would be a company will say, okay, you have to buy $20,000 worth of product, and even more so in certain SKUs. So it's like you have to buy $20,000 worth of product, and out of that, $5,000 has to be guitars, $5,000 has to be amps, $2,000 has to be hats and t-shirts, $4,000 has to be pedals. So they have mandates of certain categories that they want you to buy into. Once all that happens, now you have the privilege of buying that stuff and being a dealer. Another thing that's also important that really sucks, but it's just the truth of it. A lot of times a manufacturer decides if you can be there, carry their brand by walking in your store and see what brands you already have. So they'll walk in and they go, okay, he carries 6 brands that any dealer can carry. So he's obviously, he's not prestigious in any way. So why put our brands on the walls of this store? So that's how that's going to work. And then, so now your next part of your question is, okay, so manufacturer to store, store to customer. Store to customer works really simple. You try to sell all the stuff as fast as you can because 1, you need money, and 2, you're also going to have to buy in again if you want to keep that brand happy to some degree. That's all in the concept of new stuff. You do used stuff. You don't have to deal with any of this stuff. Customer, it's simple. We have baked into our industry a 30% margin, or we call 30 points. That's what you're going to see. If you buy it for $100, the dealer bought it for $70. That is not everything. That is just, if you gave me 10 products in this industry and told me what the price ranges are for dealers, for the average dealer, it's going to be a 30% margin. So, and that works exactly the way the other thing works. If the manufacturer is more desperate to sell product, they might give you 40% margin or double 50% margin. So you pay 50 and you sell it for 100. Ironically, the companies that give you the biggest margins are also the companies you end up having to discount the most, because the company's like, I've never heard of a fartin' tin guitar. And you're like, oh, they're totally great. They're going to be the new thing. And you're like, it's really weird. And you're like, well, it's $6.99. You're like, I can buy a Mexican Strat for $6.99 down the street. And then they're like, well, I'll give it to you for $3.99. So next thing you know, they're back to their 38% margin again. Sometimes that's how it works. Sometimes they just wait you out and they get the better margin, the dealer, that is. So, and that actually works within the same brand. For example, it is very common for huge companies like Gibson, Fender, and Ibanez to give you more margin on acoustics than they do electrics. It's just a really common thing in our industry. So if you made 30% on guitars, you might make 40% on the acoustics. You also have buy-ins where the amount of buy-in dictates how much that price is. For instance, there are companies like Boss pedals that don't really do a whole lot of buy-in. So what happens with Boss is they're like, okay, you want to buy a Boss dealer, it's 72 pedals or whatever. You have to buy that many pedals. And if you buy and if you buy this many, then the price goes, then incrementally Boss goes down in price. But at some point, it's like, that's just the price. I don't care if you buy 10,000 now, that's just the price. So buying in bulk does save you some money, but not always. Some companies like Fender are not going to care. You know what I mean? They're just going to be like, if you buy 50,000 or if you buy 100,000, they're like, yeah, it's still the same price to you guys. The other thing that happens that's important is if you buy more, sometimes the benefit is not lower prices, it's free freight. Or if you buy more, better terms being credit terms. So they ship you a bunch of product. Instead of you paying it in 30 days or 60 days, they might give you 90 or 120, or they might divide it up in payments. So they'll ship you $20,000, but they break it up in $4,000 or $5,000 payments over 5 months, which is nice. Right. Obviously, right. And some companies like PV has its own in-house, it's called PV Finance. They have their own in-house financing. So what PV does is PV will send you product, put it on that terms, but it's on PV Finance and they charge you interest on that. So some manufacturers charge interest on those waiting for those payments, and some don't. And then that's basically the process. And then, of course, the same thing. You get the stuff and then you sell it to the customer. And that's how it works. And that's what I'm giving you is most middle range stores. So that's small stores and mid-range stores. Obviously, Guitar Center, Sweetwater, totally different world. Totally different world and how that works. It's kind of the same, but different. Obviously, bigger players get to dominate. They get to dictate a little bit more. So, to the manufacturers, they get to say, hey, look, this is how we're going to do this stuff. You know what I mean? A little bit. So, it's just a little bit. Depends on the manufacturer. Small manufacturers basically have to do what the big retailers want. Big manufacturers sometimes work in a more cohesive relationship with the big retailers, where neither one is really telling each other what to do, because there's just not enough clout either way. If you enjoyed this podcast clip, you can watch the entire episode by clicking the link in the description or streaming it on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. You can also join it live every week, Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I hope to see you there. Until next time, know your gear.